Greetings, children. In this video lesson, we are going to learn the story of two expert detectives. I know that you are all so much interested in the stories of detectives. But here in this story, we are going to learn about two small expert detectives, two children detectives. They wanted to know the secrets related with a man who lives nearby building. So they started collecting information from different sites and they come to a conclusion. That is what this lesson about. This lesson is for class 7 CBSE students. The title of the lesson is Expert Detectives. First, let us go to the lesson. Expert Detectives. This is the story of two children, Nishad and his sister Maya. First, we can learn the objectives behind this lesson. It is to encourage you to interrogate, cultivate an interrogative mind in you. Second objective is make you to understand the life of the poor people around you. And the third objective is to make you understand the feelings of people who live around you. And the fourth objective is to encourage you to collect difficult information from anywhere. So, how you can become inquisitive in nature, curious in nature. The key points of the lesson. Nishad and Maya, they are siblings, brother and sister. They are very curious to know about one Mr. Nath. He is a patient of their mother, but he seems suspicious to these children. So they started collecting information about this man. They start interrogation about Mr. Nath. As child detectives, they started collecting information and interrogate those datas. They collect information about him. Maya takes Mr. Nath as a crook, as a criminal, but her brother Nishad doesn't agree with her, doesn't agree with her conclusion that Mr. Nath is a crook. Now let us move on to the story. Maya, a girl of 10, and her brother Nishad, a boy of 7. Nishad is also called 7 because Nishad is the musical note which indicates 7. Very curious about one Mr. Nath who had been living at Shankar house for over an year and was their mother's patient. These two children were very curious about Mr. Nath, who had been living in Shankar's house, a flat there, and he was a patient of their mother, who was a doctor. He was a very lonely and thin man and looked starved. Mr. Nath was a very lonely man. He was very thin and unhealthy, and he looked a hungry, starved, poor fellow. Maya was of the opinion that he was a criminal on the run. A criminal on the run means a fugitive. This is Maya's conclusion about Mr. Nath. He is a criminal on the run. He had lots of money stacked somewhere in his room, while Nishad, on the other hand, was considering the possibility of him being just a poor, friendless soul who had no proper means to sustain himself. The two children came to two different conclusions. Maya concluded that he was a criminal on run and he had a lot of money that he hid somewhere in his room. On the other hand, the little boy, Nishad, he came with the conclusion that he might be a poor man, a friendless man, and who had no proper ways to manage his life. Now let us move on to the story. However, one thing that both agreed on was that there was something peculiar and strange about Mr. Nath. Both these children, they agreed on certain things regarding this strange man, Mr. Nath. He was peculiar and he was strange looking. One day, while playing, one of their marbles went into Mr. Nath's room, and to extract it, children went there. All their curiosity started with this incident. Once they were playing that marbles, and one of the marbles rolled into his room, and they entered there to take it back. For once they had a look at Mr. Nath and since began debating about him. His strange look that made these children debating on the man, his possible profession, who he could be. That was their discussion. Maya interpreted the burn marks. The man had certain burn marks on his face, and Maya observed that those marks were caused by a fire started by the police to turn him out of his house. It was due to an encounter with the police. They fired at him. They shot at him to get him out of his house. That was the cause of that scars on his face. This is the opinion of Maya. Nishad thought it to be too far-fetched, but Nishad was not in an agreeing mood with Maya. He thought it was a far-fetched explanation, though he did not have much defense of the man. Even though he had not much defensive points about this man, he thought that such an explanation could be a far-fetched one. On a Monday, after their mamma's birthday, as Maya had to spend the day with a school friend, Nishat went to Mr. Nath's room alone and offered him a chocolate bar, considering his emaciated state. Emaciated here means very poor and thin, very starved looking. Because of that, he wanted to share a chocolate with the man. He went to his room. The occasion was his mummy's birthday. When he later told his encounter with the man, encounter means meeting. When he narrated this encounter with the man to Maya, she was disappointed that she missed it, but wanted to know more about whatever else her brother had found out. She was really disappointed to miss the chance of meeting the man again. Yet she wanted to know about the man. Nishad had a talk with Ramesh, another character. Yes, when Nishad went there, he met his aide, his assistant, his helper Ramesh there, who carried food from the restaurant to the strange man's room. Who was this Ramesh? Ramesh was the man who carried food from the downstairs restaurant to this man and found out that every Sunday a talkative, tall, fair, stout, and spectacled man came to visit Mr. Nath. He got this information also from Ramesh. Every Sunday, this strange man, Mr. Nath, had a visitor. His visitor was a talkative, tall man, but looking fair and stout, very strong. And he had a specs. And he came every Sunday to visit Mr. Nath. He also found out that Mr. Nath, though did not care what food was brought to him, tipped Ramesh well. Even though he did not mind whatever food that Ramesh brought to him, he tipped him, gave him 1 or 2 rupee or some money as a tip for Ramesh. Maya interpreted it all as a great conspiracy and saw the spectacled man as an accomplice to Mr. Nath, visiting him to give part of their money they had looted together. But when Nishad narrated the story to Maya, she had another interpretation of that relationship, the visit of the spectacled man on Sundays. She interpreted it as a, the visit was part of a great conspiracy, secrecy, and saw the spectacled man as an accomplice. Accomplice here means a companion in crime. A companion in crime is called accomplice. So Maya interpreted the Sunday visitor as an accomplice of Mr. Nath, and the purpose of his visit was to give the money they had looted. Looted means robbed. They had stolen together. Nishad wondered at his sister's imagination and thought Mr. Nath quite ordinary. But Nishad wondered at the strange thought of Maya. He simply thought that the man was an ordinary one. Maya rejected Nishad's idea further, adding that many criminals are usually ordinary looking. And when he said to this to his sister Maya, she retorted him that nowadays most of the criminals looked as ordinary men. The next day, their school was to reopen after the summer holiday. So, the next day, they had to go to school after the summer vacation. But unexpectedly, because of incessant rain, incessant here means unstopped, continuous rain, they enjoyed another holiday. The government declared another holiday, so they stayed at home. Maya took a paper and decided to jot down. Jot down means to write down the developments in the mystery of Mr. Nath's identity. So unexpectedly they got a holiday and Maya decided to jot down all the developments of her inquiry, interrogation in a written form. She shared it with her brother and talked about various points like many being scared of Mr. Nath. Then, after completing the writing, She started discussing it with her younger brother Nishad and said that at various points, like many being scared of Mr. Nath, her first point was that many people were scared of meeting Mr. Nath. He's not receiving any mail ever. And this man had never received any mail during his 1 year stay in the flat. His unfriendly nature. Then she talked about the man's unfriendly nature. She pointed it as a peculiar nature of the fugitives. Having just one friend, a possible accomplice. This man had only one friend, and that man should be his accomplice, a companion in crime. She continued. Nishad came with counterpoints. Whenever Maya told him that the man was a criminal at various points, but unluckily, he was constantly put down by Maya, who just wanted to prove that Mr. Nath was a criminal. Maya wanted to prove that her findings were true and the man was a criminal. Nisha did not like this attitude and asked Maya to stop always referring to the man as a criminal. But the little boy Nishad did not like this attitude of Maya. He wanted her to stop referring the man as a criminal. Maya pointed out the futility of all their snooping if it was not so, but Nishad said that it was not necessary for the man to be a criminal for him to want to know about him. This is the conflict between these two expert detectives. Maya said if she couldn't prove that the man a criminal, then all her snooping means spy work, spying or secret investigation, all her secret investigation would remain futile. Nishad said that it was not necessary for the man to be a criminal for him to want to know about him. He wanted to know about the man not because he was a criminal. He just wanted to know the mystery, the secret, the strange thing related with the man. And it doesn't mean that he might be a criminal, Nishad said. This is the difference between these two detectives, Maya and Nishad. Nishad wanted to be a practical detective, while Maya wants to prove that the man is a fugitive, a criminal, a crook. He stormed out of the room saying that he would become the lonely man's friend. He immediately went out of the room, and told Maya that he wanted to become the lonely man's friend. Maya noticed his adamant take on the matter and that her theory had no effect on him. Whatever arguments he put forward, they had no effect on 7, Nishad. He went out. He wanted to become a friend of that man, he said. Then finally, Maya realized that all her theory had failed in front of her brother.